Hello and welcome to the Patient First podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Bryan Laskin, where, of course, I'm looking to increase the influence of today's engaged dentists. And today, we're going to really focus on something I've been talking a lot about lately, which is that dentists need to be more profitable. I think we are in an era where profitability is being squeezed so much, and a lot of dentists don't realize it yet. And the piece that I really want to focus on is, number one, beyond your lifestyle and the profit that you want to make. Why is it so important today to increase your profitability? And that the profitability, by the way, is the key to increase the value of your practice, not just a little bit, but by massive amounts. What led to me bringing up this podcast? Well, I've talked to a lot of dentists who are interested in selling their practices lately, and a lot of them start off saying, I will not sell to a DSO. Well, that's fine if you don't want to sell to a DSO. I totally get it. Now, I sold my practices to a large DSO a few years ago, and I'll show you the reasons why, frankly, or at least some of the reasons why. But I think it's important to dig into this because I think the fundamentals of the business valuation of dentistry have to change. It's unsustainable what's going on in the marketplace right now. And frankly, for those of you that are here, that are engaged, that are looking to grow your practice, that are looking to become more profitable, you are going to benefit fantastically from it. So we're going to do some math. I'm going to break out the whiteboard. I'm going to show you exactly what that is. And, I also want to caution people. A lot of people that I've talked to, a lot of dentists, they say, well, I'm not selling to a DSO. And then they tell me a group that they're talking to. Well, a group is just another flavor of DSO. And then they say, no, this isn't a DSO. They're going to buy 60% of my practice, and then in 5 to 10 years, they're going to buy another 40%. And then and the only thing not DSO about this group that I was hearing about was that, well, the valuation is much lower than what a traditional company that calls themselves a DSO would give. So be cautionary. Any group that's looking to buy your practice for a large multiple of EBITDA and then is going to be selling it again in another few years, that's really what it is. Now, I don't say that negatively about DSOs. I work with one now. I think the problem is that they get a bad name. And so some groups out there are the newer ones are skirting the label because they don't want to have the stigmatism associated with it, because there are some negative DSOs out there that are maybe more public, more out there, and so then the DSOs get a bad name. But that's no different than a general practice. Have you been to 20 practices, 10 practices, 100 practices, or 1,000 practices like me? Let's face it, there's some garbage out there, and there's some excellent ones, and everything in between, and DSOs are no different. But I'm not here to pass judgment on the people that are creating DSOs and not calling them that, or even people who don't want to have DSOs. I am here to give you the cold, hard numbers of what is going on in the industry, high level, so that you can make a decision for yourself. Number one, what you want to do if you're looking to sell, because I know a lot of people right now are looking to have a transition, or at least plan it out. And by the way, a whole nother podcast, but you should be planning your exit way, way, way earlier than you think, right? So that's, as we all know, but everybody should be thinking about an exit at some point in their career. But even if you aren't, this will be valuable information for you, because it will really, really bring home to you the importance of focusing on your profitability. So let's get into it. I'm going to just show you some numbers here. Let me share my screen. And I'm just going to write down some numbers. So if you have a practice that, let's say, is doing $2 million a year, in total collections. And just for simplicity, we'll say for the last 3 years or 5 years, it's been completely flat, $2 million in collections. So we'll just keep that as our number, because depending on the who is buying your practice, they could be looking at the last 2 years or 3 years or 5 years, but eventually you'll get down to a number that the valuation is based on. So let's call it $2 million in collections. And for the sake of this argument, I'm going to say that this is actually a very profitable practice. They get 50% of their collections as profit, just basically for round numbers. So it's $1 million in profit, which is, it's not exactly the same as what's called EBITDA, but it's close enough for this iPad math, so to speak, right? So 2 million dollars in collections with 50% overhead or $1 million in EBITDA. Now, if you know your profitability, if you know your collections, and if you know your EBITDA, you can do the math yourself, right? There's nothing magic about this iPad, but it really, I don't think a lot of dentists have sat down and done this math, which is why I wanted to do this podcast. So let's say that a dentist, or let's say you have an associate, and you're like, oh, I'm going to sell you my practice or part of my practice, which I just did, by the way. And I was beholden to this math, unfortunately, but I wanted to have them as part of the group. So anyway, what will a dentist pay? The average dentist pay for the average practice. They will today still, that practice is valued at a multiple of EBITDA, somewhere between 65-75% of EBITDA. If you have a great practice in a great area, let's just keep the numbers simple again and say it is 70%. That dentist is going to pay you 70% of your collections for that practice. So, and they're buying it flat out, buying the entire practice. Well, what is that? That's $2 million, right? Times 70%, which equals $1.4 million. So you just got $1.4 million for your practice. And frankly, a lot of dentists, and I bought 6 practices at actually this valuation or less over the course of 10 years. So 5 of those practices, I brought them into my practice, and it was a great way to bring on new patients. It was bringing more revenue. And by the way, right now, when team members are scarce, you might want to be looking at, if you're not looking to exit, you could buy a practice next door, fold that practice into yours. If you don't have the team, if you're understaffed, that team comes with it, and then you can right size your practice, the new combined practice. A great way to go. If you can buy a practice for 70% of collections, I would do it all day long, every day. I did it 6 times in 10 years. I probably should have done it more, but I had a lot of other stuff going on. But so it's a great way to go, is buying another practice, folding it into your existing practice if you have the capacity. And if you don't, get the capacity. Again, a whole nother podcast. But that is the way the average dentist buys a practice today. How about a DSO? Let's say a large DSO comes to town and they're saying, I'm really interested, Dr. Bob, Dr. Jane, in your practice. You know what, we pay on the lower end, or maybe about average for what's going on in the marketplace, depending on your practice. But for a practice like this that has a 50% overhead with $1 million in EBITDA, my guess is that they're going to take that EBITDA number, which is the way DSOs value practices. They look at your profit, your EBITDA, and they do a multiple of that, which it's not uncommon at all for a practice like this to get five times EBITDA, or maybe even more, right? Well, I said times 5 times, so it's just times 5, which of course is $5 million. $5 million. What's going on here? I'm sure some people are thinking. They're looking at this going, that's a lot more than 1.4 million. In fact, I believe that is over 3.5 times what a general dentist would pay for that practice, right? 3.5 times, 3.5 times. Do you want 3.5 times more for one of your probably your largest asset when you go to retire? Chances are yes. So the 2 variables here that affected this number, because remember, this is the same practice doing the same things every day, all day long, producing the same amount, collecting the same amount, the same team, everything else is the same. The 2 variables here are, who do you sell to, or at least convince that other buyer how this practice is valued, and the profitability for that. It doesn't matter for a DSO if this practice was producing $5 million and collecting and had $1 million in profit, or $3 million and $1 million in profit, or $1 million, $1.2 million in collections and $1 million in profit. That marginally affects the multiple, but it's really who you sell to, if they value your practice based on your collections or on your profitability, and how much profitability there is. Now, let's say you're losing money. If you're producing 2 million and you're losing 2 million, then you should probably sell to a dentist next door. But it's probably easy for producing $2 million to become more profitable. That's a really big piece of what I'm talking about here. It's not that you shouldn't sell to a DSO. I think you should sell your practice as if a DSO is buying it, because that's the way that practices are valued by the institutions with a lot of money coming into this marketplace are. So maybe you go, if you really don't want to sell to a large group, you want to sell to another dentist, at least look at the EBITDA and the multiple, and don't give up 3.5 times your practice to that associate that's coming in, unless you just want to give it to your son or your daughter who's coming in. Then obviously there's other factors other than valuation. But my point is, I want to show you the business of dentistry, what's going on today, what practices are worth. Make your own decision with the information. And I think, number one, that decision should definitely be to focus on becoming more profitable, which is why I came out with the Insanely Productive Dentist Workshop series that's going on now. We teach you exactly what it takes to become more profitable. In fact, insanely more profitable, not 2% or 10%. I want to make you double your production. That's the very first video, is to double your personal production in the next 12 months. And we chart the path to do that. How to systematize your practice, how to make profitability, massive production automatic. So if you want to learn more and get involved and learn more about how to increase the value of your practice, how to increase your profitability, how to make more, because I think right now, like I said, I think that it's a crucial point in time for practices to get ahead of the factors that are squeezing our profitability. Go to upgradedental.com/go. Thank you very much. I look forward to seeing you there.